Hello and welcome back to Montreal by Night. So I left it off the last time at the second calm, I believe. So we'll get back in that area. The second calm. Despite the darkness of the Depression and World War II, Montreal's character was preserved. The Jacques Cartier and Mercier bridges were built in 1929 and 1934, respectively, forming new bonds between the island and mainland Canada. The French nationalist movement was given impetus during French General Charles de Gaulle's visit in the 1950s. Also, a subway system christened the Metro was built in the early 60s. Kind nightlife that was a joke from the writer, wasn't it? Nightlife in Montreal changed with each passing week in the mid 20th century, but those changes seemed je peux pas le dire, hein? Seemed inconsequential compared to those that occurred worldwide. The Orange Man Coven left Montreal for the US, making way for the arrival of the Navigators and the Mattachine. Archbishop Strathcona, finally recognized for his outstanding contribution to the Sabbath, was elevated in rank to cardinal. Véronique Lacruelle, the sole survivor of the Widows' Pact, following the fire that destroyed its brothel in 1911, took Strathcona's place as archbishop. The post-war period. The decades following World War II awakened and transformed Montreal and the whole province of Quebec. The conservative Catholic paradigm continued to reign supreme until the late 1950s, but the seeds of change were being sown as immigration continued and the city evolved. In 1960, a pent-up desire for change swept through the province like wildfire. The Quiet Revolution elected a provincial government of progressive intellectuals who backed Premier Jean Lesage. Waves of anti-clerical sentiment gripped the population, and a vision of Quebec as a modern French-speaking nation-state emerged. At the same time, Canada relaxed its immigration laws, and Montreal became even more of a melting pot. Afro-Caribbeans, Arabs, Latin Americans, and others stacked out portions of the city. The post-war period was the heyday of Véronique Lacruelle. A former member of the Widows, she quickly gained the support of the various covens through alliances. Monomancy, duels, torture, seduction, and sheer charisma. She was also Strathcona's lover, so her appointment to the rank of Archbishop surprised no one. As Archbishop, Lacruelle backed the city's immigrant settlement, pleading the shepherds with an injection of different theological and philosophical outlook. She also preserved the city's heritage. Her mortal slaves spearheaded a movement to restore all Montreal to its former glory, ensuring the existence of its cobblestone streets and secret passages. Labyrinthine. I don't even know how to say that for sure. Labyrinthine secret passages. The opening of the Litany, a Kainite summer festival, gained many of its current artistic trappings under Veronique's influence. The atmosphere of growth and liberalism that she created attracted new covens to the city, including the Navigators and Danovich Circus. Let me grab my book. Let's keep on building that genograph. So Véronique Lacruelle. Oh. So she is part of the widows. I should probably do a timeline to see better the evolution. So, but just as a note, I still need to build the kind of relationship between the covens. It's too complicated. Because then you have the navigators that I don't have on that map yet. I probably should do a spreadsheet. Not all was well for the Sabbath, though. Jonah, the Camarilla Prince of Ottawa, saw Quebec's increase in French-Canadian nationalism as ground for retaking Montreal. Trouble also arose when Quebecois missionary returned from Haiti in 1948 with a small group of Haitian professionals. Among the foreigners was Jar, a follower of Seth and servant of the ancient Sethite Gade. He spun a web of corruption in the city. The October Crisis. By the late 1960s, the Quiet Revolution had created a polarization in Quebecois society between those who wished for the province to become an independent state and those who wished for it to remain a part of the federal system. The most radical elements of the former camp formed the Front Libération du Québec, the FLQ. The FLQ was a small terrorist movement. Its semi-independent cell blew up a series of symbolic targets over several months and inflicted no casualties. However, British Trade Representative James Cross and Federal Minister Pierre Laporte were kidnapped in 1970. Laporte was killed, and federal government responded by declaring martial law on the city. Troops entered Montreal and conducted widespread arrests in October. The October Crisis marked the peak of Prince Jonah's campaign to capture Montreal, taking a page from the shepherd's tactic in the 19th century. Véronique Lacruelle fueled the fervor of Montreal's radical fringe. Quebecois nationalism had always been a mortal-driven phenomenon, but the Archbishop upped the ante by encouraging the formation of the LFQ. Her efforts forced Jonah to step up his plans. Martial law was declared as a desperate measure to suppress the Sabbath before things went completely out of control. Many of the troops entering the city were Camarilla ghouls, and they were followed by several vampires who hoped to uncover enemies to uncover enemies' lairs by rounding up the radicals. The Camorra agent played right into Veronique's hands. Few Sabbath had any direct link to the nationalists, and the search uncovered little. As night fell, the Sabbath emerged en masse and decimated the Camorra invaders, forcing Jonah to retreat back to Ottawa. The war with the Settites. In the late 1960s, a large number of Haitians arrived in Montreal benefiting from Canada's liberal immigration laws. The prospect of living in a French-speaking city was attractive to Haitians who fled repression and economic collapse in their own country. By the 1990s, the city's 30,000 Haitians made up one-third of its black population. The city Gérard, who was already established in Montreal, learned of the impending arrival of servants of Sylly, the rival of Gérard's master, Ged. Playing on Sabbath's fears that the serpent would ride Canada's wave of immigration, Gérard leaked news of Sylly's arrival. The Sabbath War Party greeted the Settites and destroyed Gérard's competition in the city before it even arrived. Gérard's own presence in Montreal was not exposed until 1972, when the shepherds Yitzhak discovered a blood cult led by Gérard's child, Moïse. The Sabbath War Party broke up the next cult gathering and learned of its serpentine roots. Even after small victories over the Settites, the Sabbath was hard-pressed to deal with the city's entrenched serpents. The cult of Gérard had spread to encompass the circles of municipal power, and Gérard used this influence to launch a campaign of random construction throughout the downtown core. The Sabbath scrambled to protect their underground communal haven. Many Sabbath felt that the city and their havens survived because of arrival of Sangri. Okay. A ancient serpent of the light who was well versed in the ways of the sand snakes. He organized a pack of snake hunters with the support of the shepherd and targeted the city's mortal pawns. The snake hunter destroyed several cults, forcing Gérard to take notice. Those humans likely to be promoted to newly opened political positions were dominated by the Sabbath. The Old Montreal renovation efforts reverted to Sabbath control, and the tide of war against the city changed. Unbeknownst to all, Sangri called upon Infernal Aid to neutralize many of the voodoo cultists. It was a war fought on two fronts, one visible and one invisible. Without their spirit to help them, the city's efforts were severely hampered. One by one, they were dragged from their pit and destroyed by the Sabbath. By the end of 1974, Moïse was captured after another city cracked under torture. Archbishop Veronique used vicissitude to turn Moïse into a vampiric leather jacket. She was known to tear away and ingest small swatches of skin fabric from the jacket. When Gérard was the only remaining Settit in Montreal, Sangre realized that his usefulness in the city was almost over. He needed one last demonstration to cement his standing in the Sabbath community. something that would elevate him to the rank of Archbishop. He turned to Metathiax for help. The demon agreed to the Serpent of Light's plan only because the chance to put an infernalist in power was too good to pass up. The shepherds traditionally held a citywide blood feast and 12th night of each year. Sangria identified the meals of choice and used Metathiax disease to poison their blood. Sabbath would drink from them, fell into deep torpor, and only Sangria and Pierre Belmar, each protected by an infernal pact, Elias, warned not to drink by Sangri, and the nomadic road wolves pack, which arrived late, escaped. Sangri accused Gerard of corrupting the ceremony and uncovered his location by using the deceased mortals as linked to the Setite temple. Actually, Sangri had uncovered the location of the temple during the interrogation of a Setite prisoner, but waited for the right time to use the information. He sent the road wolves to attack head-on. Gerard destroyed them, which created enough of a distraction to allow the other to sneak into the building using Elias' knowledge of the underground. Elias, Sangri, and Pierre were set upon by the Setite cultists and their spirit allies. Elias feasted on two of Gerard's children and therefore did not witness the thaumaturgical battle that was waged among Gerard, Sangri, and Pierre. Infernal flames eventually engulfed the whole temple, consuming the Setite and sparing the Sabbath. The poisoned Sabbath slowly recovered from the ordeal, but upon awakening, realized that several of their number had vanished. The other pack had only vague memories of dark shapes moving among them. Metathiax decided to claim a few of the bodies for his enjoyment and took those who suited his dark pleasure. Veronique was among the missing, and Sangri stepped forward as the other replacement. Since those who could contend with Sangri were too weak to fight for the archdiocese, Metathiax kept his disease active in those who could claim the title, and the shepherd supported Sangri's claim. He was declared archbishop. So Veronique was missing, and Sangri became archbishop instead of Sangri. Yeah, I need to do a timeline, I guess. The Setite temple ruins, dubbed the Snake Pit by the Sabbath, still stand on Boyer Street in Montreal North. Few people dare venture there, but the shepherds keep watch over the ruins. Some fear that survivors of Gerard's cult have gone underground and now worship him as a martyred god. Boyer Street. I can probably finish that without the optional boxes. The rule of Sangri. The late 70s and 80s were periods of political and economic instability. The Nationalist Party Québécois was elected to provincial power in 1976 and led the province to a first referendum on sovereignty in 1980. Even after defeat at the ballot box, the nationalist movement never died, and the people became increasingly polarized. The recession of the early 70s and 80s caused great misery, and Montreal began to rot. The downtown core fell into disrepair, and businesses moved away, and the spread of poverty and homelessness increased. The rich got richer, and ethnic tension flared. In 1990, the city witnessed standoff in nearby Oka and Chateauguay. Armed Mohawks defended lands that they considered sacred. The Canadian Army backed the white developers who laid claim to the lands. The Mohawks were eventually forced to leave but succeeded in stalling developmental effort and capturing media attention. Despite some ethnic tensions between vampires, most Sabbath remember Sangri's rule as a prosperous time to appease the shepherds. He brought peace to the city, providing the thinkers with the environment they needed to pursue their goals. To those who crave combat, he provided a convenient target, the Kamaila of Ottawa. Prince Jonah never fully recovered from his 1970 defeat. Sangri mounted a series of attacks against Jonah's supporters, resulting in the prince's destruction at the end of one of his own primogen in 1978. Sangri then maintained attacks on the city, sowing fear into the capital and turning it into the weak Sabbath playground that it is today. It was this combination of outlets, both intellectual and violent, that allowed for the coexistence of diverse Sabbath in Montreal. Now, however, those same forces tear the city apart. Sangri also wisely directed the Sabbath to stay away from the Oka crisis, knowing of the werewolf who protected the Mohawks. The navigator Celeste is rumored to have tried to run supplies to the Mohawks, but some say she was attacked by Lupins and barely escaped. Several other Sabbaths, posing as Canadian soldiers, tried to harass the native but were destroyed shortly after they realized the Garou didn't have a sense of humor. Ultimately, Sangri seemed to meet his end, despite his apparently positive reforms. Among the many visitors to the city were Tristan and Isolde, two Knights Inquisitors who uncovered evidence of his infernalism. The trial led by Judge Inquisitor Santiago de Soto arrived in Montreal in May of 1992 and staged a trial that lasted for 3 months. The tribunal took over the communal event and began proceeding with a formal accusation against the Archbishop. Many were ready to step to Sangri's defense, but he flatly admitted his guilt. Congratulating the tribunal for exposing him, he claimed to have acted alone. De Soto and his associates were convinced that the serpent had accomplices. The trial featured torturous interrogation of Sangri and the question of suspects. Sangre strategically admitted to having a small cabal of mortal slaves, which was added to the Black Grove. The Black Grove is a stand of human-turned blackened trees that was created in 1927 after the triumph in absentia of Malkavian Infernalis Cedilla of the Tongue. The defendant implicated no other vampires, claiming that the unbridled ambition of many Sabbath members provided him with more than enough assistance. Every vampire in the city was questioned during the tribunal. Those who had close ties to the Archbishop were examined particularly closely. Most suspicion fell on Sangre's child Ezekiel, who was recalled from the Black Hand, and on those who had accompanied Sangre during his final battle with Gerard. By August, the tribunal had confronted by August, the tribunal was confronted by the fact that Sangre truly did seem to have acted alone. So Sangre is Ezekiel's sire. Okay. On the 15th of the month, the Sabbath of the city enacted the auto de fe and took their vengeance on the Infernalists. The execution rites reached its peak 2 nights later, when the Soto appeared to destroy Sangre with a goutte of thaumaturgical fire. The tribunal closed, but unconfirmed rumors persist that 9 inquisitors returned to the city to continue the hunt for accomplices. De Soto retired from the Inquisition in October and took up residence in Montreal. Present day. The 1990s have only seen a worsening of the decay and polarization in Montreal. Urban renewal has been attempted, but the city still bears the scar of undeveloped lots and rotting buildings. Meanwhile, tension and violence between different ethnic groups has increased. Political division has been aggravated by a second referendum on Quebec's future, which resulted in an even split and a promise of a third vote to come very soon. Hope seems to leach out of the city as all efforts at improvement fail. The Sabbath faction, masterfully balanced by the Infernalist Sangre a few years back, now tear at each other's throats. Cardinal Strathcona, forced to intercede given the power vacuum that resulted after Sangre's death, and picked Archbishop Carolina Valles, an outsider, to replace Sangre. Okay, so Valles comes after Sangre as Archbishop. Veronique, Sangre, Carolina Valles, yeah. By Strathcona. The Cardinal's actions, though unusual, were intended to bring a completely neutral party into the fray to balance Montreal discordant factions. Valles, however, seems unable to satisfy the city's bloodthirsty young Sabbath or maintain the stability demanded by the shepherds. In 1994, Ezekiel Sangri's child, returned to the city at the head of a handpack and planned to establish himself as archbishop. The shepherds themselves have also entered the running, presenting former Inquisitor Alfred Benezri and as their candidate. The city's coven have reached. I need to go to bed. The city's coven have each aligned themselves behind one of the three candidates. A few wise Sabbath understand that this posturing is really an act of denial. The dangerous aura of Montreal has spread beyond its mountain confines into the city, and Sangre's legacy of corruption and pride still worms its way through the community. Other corruptors and manipulators remain undiscovered, adding to the black miracles that have built, and which may ultimately destroy the city on the river. Okay, that's enough for tonight. So we finished history. I'll do a timeline probably of that to kind of make it a bit more streamlined. I'm a visual person. I like it to be tuk tuk tuk. So I'll do something for the history. And I'll probably do something visual for the geography as well. Which led me to try to figure out where Boyer Street is. It's the old port. That's downtown. Okay. It's supposed to be a map, no, of the whole city of Montreal, because the Snake Pit is really far up and it's not close to downtown. Anyway, we'll get back to geography next time. On this note, I wish you a good afternoon, good evening, and good night.